In this tutorial, we're going to cover the tricky parts of this scarf. It's called Saroyan, and it's designed by Liz Abinante of feministy.com. If you'd like your free copy of this pattern, you can just click the link in the video description below to be taken to my website, where you will link to the pattern and the details about what you'll need to knit this. Now, this is a great first lace project, or a good lace project if you're not that comfortable with lace yet. We use worsted weight yarn and size 10 needles, which is much easier to do a lace project than the normal super thin yarn that we use in smaller needles. And of course, if you've done any of my other tutorials, you know that I believe this is a great way to learn a new technique. So bigger yarn, bigger needles. The lace part of this is really just an edging. So it's not a ton of lace project all at once. And Liz has done a great thing for us. She's given us a pattern with both written and charted instructions. So if you're not that familiar with knitting lace and you don't know which one you prefer yet, you can get a taste of both of them in this pattern. I guess the last reason is that this is a beautiful scarf. It's fun to knit, and it ends up being really pretty when you're finished with it. So in this tutorial, in the next section, we're going to talk about the construction and how this goes together, and we're going to go through the entire lace repeat. Okay, let's get started right away with knitting this scarf. First, let's take a look at what the finished scarf looks like. Here's my sample out of this beautiful yarn, and I think this pattern is one of those patterns that when you match up the right yarn with the pattern, it is so pretty. So we have this leaf pattern going here on the edge. We have garter stitch going on the first 4 stitches or last stitches of every row, and then this panel of stockinette right here increases. And the lace pattern is a 14-row repeat, and each repeat makes 1 leaf. So it's easy to count and keep track of where you are. Okay? And here is, we're going to take a look at the pattern. Here's the basic construction of the scarf. You have an increase section, and then when you have the scarf as wide as you like, you have a long straight section where you don't do any increases, and then the tail end of the scarf is a decrease section back down to just a few stitches. And if you follow the pattern as she wrote it, I think the next page tells us, yes, we have 6 increases, 10 straight section repeats, and another 6 decreases to get us back down. And that's with the worsted weight yarn and the gauge that she gives us in the pattern. Now let's take a look at the pattern. This section here is what I actually prefer to follow is the written instructions. And it goes row by row for the lace section. In the written instructions, she also tells us where we need to increase on the increase sections. And then this little chart right here is the charted instructions for the lace. And we're going to go over how to use both of those. Either one you're using, I really recommend that you have a row counter like this to keep track of where you are. And I'll give you a link to this awesome row counter that I'm using here that I always use. Okay, as usual, I've knit up a big sample using chunky yarn and much bigger needles so that you can see what's happening here. I've repeated 1 leaf section, and while I was repeating 1 leaf section, I also started the stem of the next leaf. And so the first leaf doesn't have a stem, but as you knit a leaf, you knit the stem for the next leaf, and that's where I am right now. I've just finished 1 repeat of the lace pattern in this sample. And before we go any further, if you're nervous at all about working this and messing up, because if you mess up in lace, it can be tricky to either tink back stitch by stitch or rip your needle out and start over again. So I'm going to recommend using lifelines. And to make a lifeline, a proactive lifeline, meaning you're going to put it in before you make a mistake, I like to use a smooth sock yarn in a contrasting color and just run a tapestry needle with the yarn through every stitch on the needle. This is so much easier if you're using circular needles because you can slide the stitches to the cord where you have a little bit more room. Oops, you know what I don't want to do is I don't really want to grab the stitch markers in this. The stitch markers are all placed in the setup row. I'm going to run into a problem when I go to knit this first row because I grabbed the first stitch marker, but these stitch markers are pretty cool in the way that I can snap them apart. So I'll do that when we get to the first row. Okay, now I have this lifeline put in. I'm just going to keep knitting with the lifeline there, and if I make a mistake in the next leaf and I have to rip out, I can rip out. All my stitches are held safely on this scrap yarn. I don't have to try to pick up any yarn overs or knit two togethers or anything else that causes a mess when you rip stitches out. And if you're really worried about it, I recommend putting in a lifeline after every leaf that you finish. Okay, so we're going to start with row 1. And row 1, you'll want to look at, if you're going to use the charted instructions, you'll want to look at both the written instructions and the charted instructions, because the only part that's in the chart is the actual lace section, which is in the parentheses and the brackets here. But you want to follow the instructions in the written instructions to see where you're going to put the increases in the increase section. This will all be clear in a moment. Anyway, so you've already have your free pattern. You're already following along. The first bit of instructions tell me to knit 4 because we have a garter stitch edge here. The first 4 stitches of every knit row and the last 4 stitches of every purl row are knit. And now I'm coming to my marker that's stuck. So I snapped my stitch marker open. I'm closing it again. I'll give you a link to these awesome stitch markers in the video description below. Okay, the next part tells us to knit to marker. And I want to run over this really quickly. We cast on 11, the setup row tells us where to place the markers, and then we knit a few more rows so that we have this garter stitch border. And that's before we get into the repeat. I'm just starting right out with the repeat here. And I'm knitting to the marker right now. Okay, here I am at the marker. It says make 1 left. Make 1 left is a 1 stitch left leaning decrease that ends up being pretty invisible. What I'm going to do is I'm going to find the bar between the 2 stitches, between the stitch on the right needle, the stitch on the left needle. I'm going to pick it up from front to back on the left needle. I'm more coordinated with my right hand, so I pick it up front to back with my right hand and hand it to my left needle. Then we're going to knit that stitch through the back loop. And if you have a hard time getting your needle in through the back loop like that, it means you're doing it correctly. If it's easy to get your needle in, you're probably not putting the right twist on the stitch. So follow this again. Pick it up front to back and through the back loop. Another thing I like to do is put my needle through the front loop and roll it over like that. Okay, so I'm going to do that. I've increased by 1. I slip that marker, and then I'm going to knit 3, yarn over, knit 1, yarn over, knit 2. Okay, most important, I'm going to click my row counter to let me know that I just finished row 1. Row 2 is purl 6, KFB, which is knit front back, another 1 stitch increase. So I knit a stitch normally, but I leave that stitch on the left needle, swing my right needle around to the back loop of that stitch, knit it, then pull the old stitch off the left needle. Knit 1, slip marker, and the wrong side rows are always the same here. You always purl between the 2 markers in the middle. And then knit the last 4. Row 3 is not an increase. Not an increase row, so This is all just straight knitting between the two markers, no make one here. Let's take a look at the chart for this one. Here's row 3. Because it is a right side odd numbered row, I'm going to read it from right to left. So I have, see, I'm not as quick with the charts to go down here and refer this way, but it's knit 2, purl 1, knit 2, yarn over, knit 1, yarn over, knit 3. And everything is explained here in the chart. Okay. Knit 2, purl 1, knit 2, yarn over, knit 1, yarn over, knit 3. And if you're ending up with the right number of stitches at the end of the row, you know you're doing well. Let me get that out of the way. Row 4 is purl 8. KFB again. So you knit a stitch normally, leaving the old stitch on the left needle, swing your right needle around to the back loop of that stitch, pull that through, old stitch off the left needle, then knit 2, slip the marker, and wrong side row is purling between the two markers and then knitting the last 4. I'll tell you, when I made this scarf, I didn't memorize the lace chart, but it ends up being pretty easy to memorize everything else. Okay, row 5 is another increase row. So I knit the first 4, slip the marker, knit up to the next marker. I'm going to do a make 1 again. So I find the bar between those 2 stitches, put my left needle in from front to back, and knit that through the back loop. Just increased by 1. And then it's knit 2, purl 2, knit 3, yarn over, knit 1, yarn over, which is interesting because the yarn over, knit 1, yarn over is giving us this base of the leaf right here. Knit 4. Okay, row 6, just so that I mention it here, we read all the right side rows, and Liz has made it easy for us to tell which direction to read the chart because she has the numbers from the place you should start reading them. So row 6 is an odd numbered row, and we're going to start reading the lace chart from left to right. Just some basic chart reading help there. Okay, row 6 is purl 10. KFB, knit 3, slip marker, now I'm purling. My hands are moving faster than my mouth here. I should mention I'm using double pointed needles here. I don't really recommend that you use double pointed needles for this, but when I'm working on the table like this and demonstrating, it's best that I use the shortest needles that I can. Otherwise, they just flop around on the table. Row 7 is another increase row. So I knit up to the second marker, make 1 left, knit 2. I'm getting tangled here, just a moment. Knit 2, purl 3, and now we're starting the top of the leaf, so I'm going to do an SSK, which is a slip slip knit. And I'm going to demonstrate it here, but I'll also give you links to slow technique videos that demonstrate each one of these stitches more slowly. I'm going to slip 1 stitch as if to knit, slip a 2nd stitch as if to knit, take the tip of my left needle and put it through the front of those 2 stitches, wrap the back needle and pull it through. I've just decreased by 1 with a left leaning decrease. Now I knit 5. And I'm going to decrease the other side of the leaf with a right leaning decrease, which is just a knit 2 together. And knit 1. Row 8 is purl 8. KFB, knit front back, purl 1, knit 3, and then back to our normal wrong side, purling and then knitting the last 4. Nine is another increase row. If you can't tell, that's the first thing I do when I look at the instructions. I see which row, if my row is an increase row, because this first part of the right side row is all the same until you get up to the 2nd marker, and then it either is or is not an increase row. This one is. So I'll make 1, slip the marker, knit 2, purl 1, knit 1, purl 2, then another SSK, slip 1 as if to knit, slip 2 as if to knit, put your left needle through the front of those 2 stitches, wrap the back needle and pull it through, knit 3, knit 2 together, knit 1. Row 10 is purl 6. KFB, knit 1, purl 1, knit 3. Something you'll find really handy while knitting this pattern is if you can knit without watching your hands, it's pretty handy because you can keep your eye on the pattern and read what you're supposed to do next and just let your hands do it instead of watching everything you're doing. It might take some practice, but if you can learn that, it will help you with work the lace section. Row 11 is not an increase. Whoops, I have a stitch here that didn't get pulled through. There we go. Whoops. Row 11 is knit 2, purl 1, knit 1, purl 3, SSK, slip, slip, knit 1, knit 2 together, knit 1. We're almost through this first leaf. "12 is purl 4. We're getting fewer and fewer stitches in the lace section. KFB, knit 2, purl 1, knit 3, but this middle stockinette section is getting bigger, which makes for good TV knitting, if you ask me. Okay, 13. This is where we start running into a couple of interesting stitches. 13 is an increase row. So I'll make one here. And now we're going to start really decreasing for the top of the leaf. Knit 2, purl 1, knit 1, purl 4, and the next stitch is SLK2P. And what that means is we're going to slip one, and you always slip as if to purl. Put your needle in like you're going to purl and slide it over. Then we're going to knit the next 2 stitches together. Then we're going to take the tip of our left needle and grab that stitch that we slipped and basically bind it off over the one we just worked. This is going to give us a nice point to the top of the leaf. And then we knit 1. And this is the last row of the leaf pattern. Starts us off with purl 2 together. And then the next bit of instructions say bind off 3. Liz doesn't specify. I'm going to suggest binding off purl-wise to give us a nice bind off edge on the front of the work. So I'm going to purl 1 stitch, pull the first stitch over the other to bind off 1. Purl another stitch, pull that stitch over the other one to bind off 2, purl 1 more. That is 3 stitches bound off. Knit 1, purl 1, knit 3. Okay, that is the end. Oh, you see my needles are too short here. I'm glad I'm done with that leaf section because my needles won't hold much more than that. Now that I've finished one leaf section, I want to reset my counter back to 0 because I'll want it back to start row 1 again with the next leaf pattern. And I'll probably want to add another lifeline to my work so that if I do make a mistake in the next leaf, I can rip back to this place where I know that I've done just fine. And there's a leaf we just made, and here you can see the stem going up to this leaf. One more thing before we move on. If you're ever not diligent with your row counter and you lose count of where you are and what part of the lace pattern you're in, you can just go back to this lace chart, and if you have kind of an idea of where you are, you can count the number of stitches after the last marker and then see which row it corresponds with, because any box on here that isn't grayed out is a live stitch. So if you find that you have 7 stitches, you can just count across and see which rows have 7 stitches and see which one you finish last. Okay, next up, yes, we're going to talk about blocking the scarf and doing the finishing work on the scarf. Once you've finished your scarf, you've done the increase sections, the straight sections, and the decrease sections. Using the amount of yarn that Liz recommends in the pattern, you should end up with a scarf that's about 6 feet long. That's what mine ended up being. And then you'll want to weave in the ends and block it. And you can do a full-on wet block where you soak it in the water and then lay it out flat to dry, or you can steam block it. Really, the technique for how you're going to pin it out is the same. I'm going to demonstrate with an iron and steam blocking here in this video. So let's go ahead and take a look. Here's my finished scarf, and I'm going to demonstrate how to pin it out. And if the scarf is wet, you'll be doing the same thing. I'm going to pin out a dry scarf and then apply some steam to it. So I have my pins here, and the first thing that I want to do is I want to make this edge straight. It won't stay that way, which is fine, but I'm going to go ahead and pin it out straight to begin with. And blocking boards are very handy for this, but if you don't have one, you can always just use an ironing board or something else that you can pin into. But I love having this grid on here to make it really easy for me. Now I have already steamed this out, so my leaves are looking pretty good. They are starting to curl up a little bit. So I'm going to pin each leaf out like this and pin the top point of the leaf out. That's going to give each leaf really nice shape. Mine's looking a little rough because it's been shoved in a bag waiting for today when we're doing the video shoot. Okay, that looks good. And no real need for me to pin this side. It's staying pretty nicely. So I have a steam iron here, and I'm not going to press down, but I'm going to let the steam soak into the fabric. Pressing down will really flatten out your stitches, but just floating the iron over the work on the hottest setting. Just get some steam in there, and then while it's still warm, pat it out. Even out your stitches in the middle. There you go. My blocking board was just too short for me to do this whole thing at once, so I did most of it and then let it cool like this, and then did the last section because it's longer than my blocking board. Anyway, you let it cool like this, it will flatten and dry like this, and it'll stay mostly like this until you shove it into a bag like I did. Then you take the pins out and you can wear it. Anyway, that's it, the Saroyan scarf. Have fun knitting it.
He's no dancing bear.